So again, today is calculations and functions in Excel. And I have taken a bit more of a basic approach to today. So we are not going to be going in depth into the advanced functions of Excel. So overview of today, we're going to talk about what formulas and functions are. We're going to just review basic math calculations that you would have learned, in your young years in math. We're going to look at sum and auto sum functions, the minimum and the maximum functions, how to calculate averages, how to use the count function, absolute versus relative, which is really, really important to understand. Some basic logical functions, those are and, if, or, and we're going to look up VLOOKUP because that's a really, really useful tool in Excel. So again, some basic overview functions, and if you have additional requests, please let Caitlin know. So to recap, if you were with us a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the structure of Excel, and I just want to give a quick recap to that because it's very important that you understand these concepts. So in front of us here is an Excel worksheet, and if you have multiple sheets, you are working in a workbook. We work in columns and rows, which are vertical and horizontal. Any item is a cell, and you could also have a range of cells. So, you could have multiple columns and rows at one time. And the layout, again, the tabs and the ribbons and the groups are all located in the top. And today we will likely be spending most of our time in the formulas tab along those ribbons. Your scroll bars, again, vertical and horizontal, those are located at the top side and the bottom. Your zoom bar, again, in the bottom corner, and there's view options down there. Your quick access toolbar is all up here, and your formula bar as well. So again, today, because we are talking about calculations and functions, your formula bar is mainly where you're going to work through. So very quickly, we are going to talk about what the difference between formulas and functions are. So formulas really in Excel are the backbone of Excel and the main use of what this tool is used for. And it's really important that you have the right skills and knowledge base to utilize these tools to their full potential. So what do formulas do? Well, formulas help us perform a wide range of calculations within a worksheet or a workbook. And this could be as simple as, adding up a column or adding up multiple columns, or as complex as date and time calculations, value lookups, etc. So what is a formula? Really, it is a simple calculation. And when used in Excel, it's used as a function. So it can be basic functions, like I said, addition, subtraction. It can also have multiple functions to perform very, very complex calculations. So today, our goal, when you're looking at the data in front of you, you really want to determine, based on the data, the formulas and the functions that best suit the data in front of you. And as you continue to utilize the Excel tool and understand the formulas, you will become a more advanced user. So there are hundreds of formulas in Excel, all of which can be found in your formulas toolbar. And I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to move over into Excel. Sorry, I have so many screens on the go here. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I'll make this bigger. So again, like I had said, there are hundreds and hundreds of formulas in Excel. They can all be found up here in the formulas toolbar. So again, and they're kind of broken down in the function library into sections all the way across here. Some are very, very specific. So some formulas might only be used by, let's say, an engineer or an accountant, whereas other ones are very, very simple calculations and can be used by any of us on any given day, obviously, depending on your profession. Today, we are just going to work with some common ones, like I had mentioned in our webinar overview. So in front of us here is some basic math calculators. And before we get into Excel, we want to just review them really, really, really quickly and how we enter a formula into Excel. So let's start. If you have Excel in front of you and you are working alongside with us, great. If not, I will be working in the actual worksheet as well. So you are welcome to just follow along that way. Some of us use multiple screens and some of us only have one. So I need to remember that when I do present. So if we want to do a simple calculation in Excel, we always want to start a calculation with an equals sign. That is very important. Otherwise, you are simply going to get 10 minus 4. If you don't put an equal sign, it's going to try to pull something else. So when you're using Excel as a calculator, you really always want to start with an equals sign. So in this case, I have two very simple numbers in front of us, a 10 and a 4. I am going to add up those like I would on a calculator and hit enter. Oh, it's going to format this for me. Not to be numbers. There we go. So again, if you use Excel as a basic calculator, it gives you the same value as if you would use a cell reference. The only problem here is that if your numbers were to change, you have to go back, and there's multiple ways to do that, either in the formula toolbar up top to change your numbers, let's say 10 plus 2, or you can just double click on the cell and do it there. However, if you're working in a worksheet and you have hundreds of cells with data in them, and you are using a simple calculator to calculate, and that information changes, it's not going to capture that if you're using a calculation. What I would recommend is that we use cell references. So what I mean by that, delete that, start with the equals, and you're going to use the cell reference under B11 and the cell reference under B12 using the same basic math calculators. In this case, I'm using addition, because if that number were to change to, let's say 7, your cell automatically calculates. So it's really, really important that you're using cell references. You're doing the exact same calculation instead of using Excel as a calculator. Okay, so you see down at the bottom, again, we're going to switch to our second worksheet. Our second worksheet is our sum function, and I'm going to make this bigger so hopefully everybody can see it here. So sum is really, in my opinion, the most common used function in Excel. And here in front of us, it's just a very, very simple basic table. It's broken down by months in the column, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 across the top. And again, there is also totals on either side. So the sum function allows us to add a list of numbers together. And really, truly, it is a great tool to use when you have a very complex data set and you need to add up information within that data set. So for example, in the worksheet in front of us, we are going to use the sum function, and we're going to total up the values in Q1 from January to December. So to do that, we're going to click on cell C15, and we're going to start with an equals sign. So now notice, if I start typing in sum, Excel here automatically wants to try to choose what I'm doing. It thinks I'm doing anyway, in Excel. So in this case, we are using sum. So there's two ways to move through this. You can either click with your mouse on the sum, or, sorry, double click with your mouse on the sum, or if you go back to the sum when it's just highlighted here and you hit the tab button, it will do the same thing for you. So again, either way does the same, gives you the same results. And another tip, we always need to use brackets when we're using functions in Excel. If you do not have a bracket, it's going to give you an error. So by using the tab function, it gives us the bracket for us. So to use the sum, we are going to grab the first cell that we need, and we're going to drag all the way down to December. So you can see it's giving us, we are summing from cell C3 down to cell C14. And the use of a colon here is kind of like a two, another word for two in English. So we're summing from C3 to C14. We close the bracket and we hit enter, and it's going to give us a value. And again, when you click back on that cell, you can see the reference of the calculation here. So there are other ways that we can sum, not just typing in here. There are other ways to do it in Excel. Another way that we can summarize a column is by the use of AutoSum. So to do this, we want to head up to the function section of your toolbar. So again, formulas up top. And if you see here, this very first one has an AutoSum function. It also has a drop-down arrow. So when we open this, or when we click on this, it will give us an AutoSum here. And it's assuming we're summarizing the same thing like we did in the column before this. And in this case, we are D3 through to D14. If you hit enter, it will summarize it for you. Third way of doing that is if you go up to the formula bar and you double click here, you have a little pop-up insert function that comes up. So if you're unsure of what you're trying to do at any given time in Excel, you can double click on the formula bar and type in a brief description here. So again, we're adding a column or adding up a column. If we hit go, it wants you to rephrase. So we say addition and hit go. No. So if we hit sum and go. And so do you see, if you're not really sure what you're wanting to do in Excel and you search for a function, it's going to give you recommendations based on the phrase that you're giving. This case, we want to hit sum and we hit OK. A second function argument will pop up. And again, in this case, it's automatically assuming that we are summarizing column 3 because in this worksheet, we've already summarized column C and column D, very similar to what we're doing in column E. You always want to make sure that your cell reference here is the same reference that you're using in your worksheet, which in this case it is, and you hit OK, and it will do it for you. So again, there are several ways that you can use the sum function in Excel for your data. Hopefully everybody is okay there. The very fourth one that I'm going to show you is actually the use of a keyboard shortcut. So if you are not savvy on the keyboard shortcuts, they can be very, very helpful and useful. So in order to do that, we are going to click on column F in the total bar. And if you hit the Alt button and the equals button, it will do that for you. So again, it's assuming that we are summing from F3 through to F14. It's done it for you. You hit enter. So if you're into the keyboard shortcuts, it can be a very, very useful tool. Again, that is Alt and equals. So I want to move down now into the min and the max tabs. So just hit your next tab over. And again, I will make this bigger so everybody can see that a little bit better. So here we're going to use the minimum function and the maximum function. And the minimum and the maximum functions want to find either the lowest value in a range of cells, or the max function wants to find the highest value in a range of cells. So these are quite simple to create, but obviously very, very useful. So here in cell G3, we've already got the function in front of us. So we want to do the equals sign, and in this case, min, and we're trying to find the minimum value in this series here. So in the month of January, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, and it finds the range C3 through to F3. So let's do it in row number 4. We're going to say the equals and the min. And again, Excel is always going to try to figure out what you're typing when you type in a function here. Here, the min. And there's always a help bar here as well. It is small, but it does tell you what the min does. So in this case, it returns the smallest number in a set of values. It ignores logical values and texts. So it's a little help tool. If you're not sure what you're choosing, always refer to the help tool. It can be very, very useful. We want a bracket here. And like I said, we are going to use this range. We close our bracket. We hit enter. It gives us the minimum. And, oh, I didn't do that. Yeah, I did. So in order to autofill, there are 2 ways to autofill. You can drag all the way down, and it will autofill your cells for you. You can also hover over this little green square that's in the bottom corner. If you stick your mouse to it, which creates a cross, and you double click, it will also fill the cell for you. So again, you don't have to drag the formulas so that the formulas fill a series. There are simple things that you can do there. To do the max is very, very similar. It is simply equals and max. And again, it's going to tell you what you're trying, think what you're trying to do and do it. And again, this returns the largest value in a set of values. You click on the max. You're wanting to use the series in February. You close off your bracket and you hit enter. If you don't hit enter, the cell is going to remain active and the formula is not going to close. So it's always important that you hit enter when you're finalizing your function. So the third bar we're going to work through is the average function. And again, that's the next sheet in your workbook. So the average function, again, very self-explanatory. It's going to create and calculate the average in a set of cells or a series of cells or a range of cells. There are two ways to calculate this function, either within the cell or using the functions box located above the worksheet, which is right here. So on the worksheet, we have Q1 through Q4 across the top, and we want to calculate the average of these four values within the month of January. So in order to do that, in the function bar here, we have equals average, and we choose the range or the series of range. I'm going to do that in row number 4. So equals average. And again, it is the very first one that comes up. I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to choose my range. I'm going to close my bracket and hit enter. And here it is there. So another way that we can do this is actually up here in the AutoSum toolbar. If you use the drop-down arrow, it's going to give you several features and functions that are used every day or very, very frequently, enough that it gives you a quick average here. Now, the only thing with using this section is that it wants to do the average of what's above, and that's not what we're trying to capture in this case. So you need to make sure that you're checking your formulas when you're using these quick functions. And if it needs to be changed, which will always highlight what it's trying to calculate, you can simply change to drag across, which is what we are looking to capture, and hit enter. So again, to review that, that is that AutoSum in the corner using the drop-down arrow. You want to choose, in this case, average. And again, see, it's trying to calculate what's above. We don't want that. We want the average of Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, and hit enter. And if you go back and choose any of these cells, and you click here in the formula bar, it's going to show you in a highlighted manner what you're calculating. If you want, you can either drag and fill the series, your choice, just simply for practice. So in a case here, we're going to use the count function. So if you have a large data set, and I don't have a large data set, I only have 10 or 11 students, let's say this is a student test mark in this class. But if you have a data set with hundreds of cells, and you need to quickly count up the amount of people that are working, that are working within this data set, this function is very, very useful. So it is also very common because it is so useful. So it counts a number of items in a selected range within a selected list. So to begin by doing this, we are going to be typing in the cell, and we're going to actually type it in up here. I already have it listed, but we're going to do equals and the count function. Okay, and again, it is the first one here. And it's going to want to do the value of the names of the students. So in this case, column B through to B16 here, and a bracket, and let's hit enter. And it's giving us a 0 value. So why is it doing that? Because the count function wants to count numbers within a list, and we've just tried to count text. So we've tried to count names. We have not tried to count numbers. So how do we fix this? Let's go back to cell F2. And we're going to use it using scores instead. So our range will not contain numbers. So we're going to delete that. We're going to use the count, can't spell today, count function, and we're going to do here in the numerical set. So again, there are 14. So in this case, there are 14 students. So let's try if, let's say, we had a blank cell. So we're going to use what's called the count A function. So if we have a count A function, it works very similar. So let's choose one in the sequence. I've chosen Chantal, and I've just deleted her completely, okay? It actually has updated the number of students because we have a blank here. It's changed it from 14 to 13, okay? So the count A function, if we were to use it in a name, so let's go back. Let's use the count, and we're going to use count A. We're going to choose a series. Did I just... Again, gives us 13. If we were to do it with this cell, same thing, 13. So let's look at the other feature, which is count blank. So count blank works very, very similar, but it will only count what it's asking, what we're asking it to do, being the blank cells. So if we look in this formula bar, we hit equals and we want to put in count. And again, you have suggestions here in front of you. We're going to choose count blank. And it says it counts the numbers of empty cells in a specified range of cells. So if we click on that, we're going to click a specified range. Close our bracket. We have 1. So if you were to delete multiple, it would tell you how many are blank. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to stick Chantal back in here. And in this case, so as your data set changes, this will also change. So again, 3 things with the count function. It can do multiple things. It can count numerical values. It can count all values, being the count A. So again, if I go back and show you count A, and I use student names in this case, it will count all, or count blank will only count blank cells. So if you have a large data set and you have cells missing or blank numbers or things that have been taken away, it will tell you where those are. So it's a really easy feature from a count perspective. We flip over to our next one. This is where the percentages come in, Caitlin. So hopefully maybe this can help. If you were with us last week, we talked a little tiny bit about absolute cells or absolute functions. This is really important. And there is a quick little keyboard shortcut here to keep in mind. So the difference between absolute and relative is actually really, really important to understand. So formulas that are relative cells and functions that are in a sequence of calculations. So they change as the sequence within your workbook or worksheet changes, whereas absolute are functions where they continuously use the same cell to calculate. So in this case, we have a very simple salary table with employee IDs, names, their hourly wages, a sample of what they've worked hour-wise in a year, their salary. And here we have a bonus to total. So we're going to kind of complete the series here. And we've identified what the bonus amount is. So that's 4.5%. And that's located up here in cell J1. So 4.5%. So in order to, let's first calculate some relative functions in Excel. And by doing that, I'll delete these here. By doing that, a relative function simply is their salary plus their bonus will give them a total. That is considered relative. And when we finish the sequence, you can see as we move down that it's moving as it goes down. It's choosing E5 plus F5, E6 plus F6, E7 plus F7, and so on and so forth. These are what we call relative functions. So in order to do an absolute function is using the calculation in the same cell every time, as opposed to using the series of cells. So as you can see here, in the bonus section, we've taken E2, which is their salary. We've multiplied it by the bonus amount, okay? And if you can see here in the calculation, to do an absolute value adds a $sign in front of the cell number and the cell letter. If you are missing one, let's take one out, for example, and you fill the series, it's going to give you an error. It's not going to complete the series. Alternately, if we add that relative back in, but we take it out, and let's say you've missed it, if you've typed it in, and again, we fill the series, double clicking using that bottom box, it has worked, but it won't always work, okay? So in order to do this, and in order to get absolute calculations every time, we want to do the 41,000 and we want to multiply it by cell G1. In order to make this J1 absolute, if you hit F4 on your keyboard, it makes it automatically do that. So that is a keyboard shortcut here for making something an absolute cell. Again, if we do it again, you want the salary, you want to multiply it by J1 and hit F4, it will automatically make it an absolute calculation for you. And when you fill the series and you look at the cells as you move down, so again, as you move down into row 6, it's saying E6 and it multiplies it by that same absolute cell every single time. So the next section here is our logical functions. So we have a couple examples in this worksheet. I'm going to make it significantly bigger so that you can see. And these, the three items that we're going to look at very simply are the if, the and the or function. The and the or functions work very, very similar. But the if example here is actually really good. So if you're a individual in the finance department joining us today, or really any department, you're a manager, let's say, and you have a list of expenses, that's what we have in front of us. And your policy says that anything over $1,000 threshold must be approved by a manager or by a superior of some sort. So again, we've itemized the threshold here. We've said it's $1,000. And really, really quickly to review, these operator functions here, so the equal to, the greater than or the less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or not equal to, are really important functions to understand and to know, because they're likely ones that you're going to be using if you're going to be using a table like this in the future. They are the basic calculations when you're filling in the series and the function. So if we move over to here, we have a list of employees and we have a summary of their expenses. And we're looking to find out whether or not, very quickly in Excel, an approval is required. So we are going to be using the if function. And here, we're always going to start with the equals. And we want to type in if. So again, if we hover over if, the help tells us it checks whether a condition is met. and returns one value if true and another value if false. So if we click on the if, it's now telling us what it needs in order to finish this sequence. So it's saying the logical test. So in this case, what are we trying to do? Well, we want to know if the $1,500 is greater than or equal to our identified threshold, because we want it to tell us whether or not it needs an approval. So in this table, we're going to say that cell C7, if it is greater than or equal to our threshold, then we want a comma. And then it says value if true, value if false. Okay. So in order to make something more meaningful, you can simply, oh, no, you can't, sorry. You can simply type in true and false. Ooh. My fingers aren't working today. Okay, so it's telling you, oh, if I go back in here, it's telling you in the function here, which if it's true, it will identify. If it's false, it will identify. We hit enter. There it is here, and it will finish your sequence for you. So again, $900 is less than the threshold. The rest, true and false. Oh, that's my bad. So again, I forgot when I did this. We want to look at using an absolute cell reference here. So if we go back to C17 using our keyboard shortcut, F7, we want this calculation to always use this threshold, not following a relative sequence. So we want to recopy that fill in the sequence and it will change. So we see we're always referencing that absolute cell. Now, if you were to look at this as anybody, a false and a true doesn't really give you very much information from a finance perspective. It would be better if it said approval or let's say okay or good. So how do we change that? This true and this false are automatic text that will come into play here. You can change it to be whatever you want. Now, when you're using text in a formula function, it always needs to have quotations around it. Otherwise, it will give you a cell error. So if you're here, let's say, if it's true, we're going to want to say approval, let's say. And if it's false, or it's less than $1,000 in this case that we're looking at, we'll just say okay. Okay, so if we hit enter, in this case, because this is under the threshold, it is okay. If we fill the sequence, it's going to finish this for us. So this actually gives us a little bit more meaning to the work that we're using by adding in your own text here, whether or not it requires, let's say, an approval or not, or it is true and false, or it is positive, negative, whatever it is that you're working on in your data set, you can change this so that it has meaning. And if this threshold were to change to, let's say, 1,300, this will automatically update, or 650, this will automatically update. So if you have this as a template, then it will always give you the amounts that it needs to, and it will allow you very quickly to see what needs approval and what does not. So it does require, it will give you some efficiency within your work. So we're going to move down to the AND function. You can see that. Yeah, okay. So in front of you, I've done test scores. So there's students' names here in this column. There's test scores in column C, test scores in column D, and then we have our results column here. And our first cell has already been done for us, but let's take a look at what we want to do here. So this is another logical statement, and really allows you to perform, in this case, 2 tests. So we have test scores, 2 test scores, and these are the test scores that are required in order to be a pass or a fail. So test 1 has to be above 75. Test 2 has to be above 80. If both of those conditions, because we're using the AND function, are met, you'll get a pass. If either of those conditions are not met, you are going to get a fail. So in this case here, we see that test score number 1 was 70, but the threshold was 75. Test score number 2 was 80, but the threshold was 80. So 1 passed, 1 failed, ultimately fail, because we are using the AND function. So let's fill the series. And how do we do that? So if you can see here, this looks like a little bit larger of a, and I apologize, the function bar is quite small. I don't know that I can make it any bigger. I can't. This is quite, it looks like quite a long calculation, but really truly it's not. We want to start with the equals and the if, okay? And then we want to say, sorry, if in brackets. So we're using the AND function. Ooh. Okay, in the AND function. So if this cell is greater than or equal to test score threshold number 1, okay, comma, if test score number 2 is greater than or equal to here, comma, then now we need to indicate logics, right? So logical 3, what do we want it to say? In this case, we want to say a pass if it's true, and a fail if it's not. And again, like I had just mentioned, if you're adding text into a function bar, it has to have quotations around it. So make sure that you have those or you will get an error. Oh, it's missing a parentheses. So as you can see, I have a parentheses here and a parentheses or brackets. In order to close off that calculation, it's going to give you an error, and it's usually going to tell you what it wants. So in this case, I've done something wrong with my cell. It will give you here. You can hit help, and the help button is great in Excel. You can hit OK, and it's going to let you come back and fix it. So it's asking me what is wrong. Okay, so what is wrong? Greater than, equal to this, greater than or equal to this. Then we want to pass or a fail. Bracket. No. So if, and I have an and, I'm going to put a bracket there. So my logical function, greater than or equal to test 1, comma, greater than or equal to test 2, comma, then I want a pass or a fail. Close out my bracket. Oh, come on, Lauren. Oh, there. My fingers are not working today. It's like it would be a Monday. There we go. Oh. Okay, so let's just look here because apparently my fingers are not working. So if and function, this is greater than or equal to this, greater than or equal to this, I was missing this comma. We need the pass or the fail. So if we were to finish the sequence here, and we looked here, we said if this and this, we get a pass. But I also want to make note again of that absolute cell reference. So this I-22 and I-23 are both absolute cells. When we have them in our calculation, we need to make sure we use that F4 keyboard shortcut or $ if you would like to input those in to make sure that they're absolute references and they don't fill the sequence when they go down. Does that make sense to everybody? I think so. So the OR is very similar to the AND function. It is saying if one or the other passes the threshold, we are good to go. And as you can see here, we didn't finish the sequence with a pass or fail. So if you don't finish the sequence with information in a text that you want it to say, it's automatically going to use true or false. So again, if I look up here, we simply have equals or, I'll type it in, equals or, and we have a bracket here. So cell C43 is greater than or equal to test score number 1, and we want to make it absolute, F4, comma. So D43 is greater than or equal to cell I43, and again, F4 to make it absolute. When we close off that bracket and we hit enter, it's going to give us true. And if we fill the sequence, it's going to give us true. So to change that or to add it so that we've done something like we've done above with the text in the pass or the fail, let's go here. And we're going to need to add another parentheses because again, we're adding text to it. So we could say a pass or a fail. Close off the bracket. So see what I've done here. It's given me a value error. And why has it given you a value error? I'd like to show you this really quickly because this is a nice trick. So if you have a value error in Excel, let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. It's going to give you this error here. And it's going to tell you, it says a value used in the formula is of the wrong data type. Okay. So you can, if you do this and you have an error and you don't know where to look, this drop down arrow will help you. So it's error and value. It can give help. It can show calculation steps. You could ignore it if you'd like, but in this case, it's not of giving you any value. You can edit it yourself in the formula bar, or you have error checking options. So this is really good if you are new in Excel or you're not great. You can come and you can look here and you can get help for how to fix it. So again, if you're a new user, this is a really, really good tool. So let's say we hit calculation steps. So we're doing a logical function. This is what it's asking us to do. And it wants, we can evaluate it. So it gives us the wrong value here. So close. So if we want to go back, and we want to get help. I don't know if it's going to pull up a whole help toolbar. You can search in the help toolbar and it will give you options. Or you can simply go here and you can change it yourself. So again, I'm just going to go back. I'm going to remove. But that's a really good thing to look for when you're using Excel. Okay, so the last thing, because I think I'm running here really close on my time. We're going to look at the VLOOKUP function. So this is really, really useful. I use this quite frequently. And it allows you to look up, in this case, VLOOKUP is looking up information vertically within a table. So we have a small table. If you had a huge table and you were trying to look up specific things in a table, this is a really, really good function to use. So for today, we're going to construct a VLOOKUP, and we're going to be doing it by using an employee name. So I've already done it here, but we're going to do it below just so that you can see how it's constructed here. But in the case of this, I'm looking for, let's say I'm looking for Caitlin. And what I have already here is that her designation. So I want to know what Caitlin is in this company. In this case, Caitlin is communications. If I wanted to know who Dana was, it's giving me an error. And we'll go through what that error is here shortly because this is a common error if you have spaces at all in any of your text cells in Excel. So if I go back and I find Caitlin, gives me communications. So how do we build this? Okay. So we build this simply by a VLOOKUP function. And the function is here in front of us, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do it ourselves. So if we move down here, we are going to start with an equals, and we type in VLOOKUP. Again, as I've said before, it does give you a little help thing by what it's wanting to do. Now, this is a little bit more of a, not a simple cell A through to cell 20. It's got several things that you need to be mindful of when you're actually putting things in this lookup. So it's going to want to pick a cell value. So we're going to use a blank cell because we want to be able to type in a name here and have it tell us what we're looking for. So we're using the blank cell. Okay. The next thing it tells us is table array. So we're using a range of data here. And in order to drag a range of data, you just simply click on the first cell, drag down here. It's going to give you the range of data A2 through to E11. And again, the use of a 2 is used with a colon. Here, we're looking at column index numbers. And the way that column index numbers work, so if your table was situated farther across your screen, let's say it started in row E and it went E through to row J, instead of starting right at the nicely in the corner in column A, excuse me. Columns in tables are numbered 1, 2, 3, etc. However many columns. It doesn't matter where that table is in your Excel worksheet. Those columns are always column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. So it could be located over here. It's still going to be column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. That's always, you always have to remember that, or you will get an error. In this case, we're looking for what their title is. So we're wanting to use column 3. Okay. And the last one is the range lookup. So it's giving you what you need here, either true, which it gives an approximate match. So it's going to give an approximate match based on the information in your table, or an exact match. We want an exact match. And I'll show you why here in a minute. You're going to close off the calculation and you hit enter. Okay. Because we don't have anything in here yet, which is what we've referenced when we look it up in B15, it's going to give us an NA. If we were to type in a name, let's type in Chantal. There it is. So it's looking up in this series, it's looking up a name, and it's telling us she is the manager in this series because we've asked to give the answer based on column 3. Okay. You could ask to give, let's say we're looking for Chantal and we want her to know what team she's on. Okay. So if you go back to the series, if you change number 3, because that's the column that we're working with, to be number 4, which is the team that she's on, and hit enter, there it is. It's telling us that she's in management. Chantal, we've looked at, she's in management. If we change it to say Maddie, for example, Maddie is in admin. So that's a really good way, as long as you know exactly the data in your data set, what ways that you can search functions. Now, going back to what I said when I had given the error, let's choose Dana. I type in Dana, I hit enter. It's giving us an error. So why would it be giving us an error? Because we know that the formula works. We just saw that the formula worked. Okay. If we go back and we click on Dana's cell, you can see, I'll double click right in the cell. You can see that when the information was entered here, there was a space after her name. Okay. And because we've chosen in our lookup sequence here that we want exact matches, because she has a space after the A in her name, it's giving us an error. So if we were to change the calculation here to instead say true, which is an approximate match, would it work? No. We need to make sure that in our data sets, because it's giving us an approximate, right? When we use true. When we use false, it gives us exact. So if we were to take that out of data and hit enter, it works. So you really want to make sure when you're using VLOOKUP that the data in your data set is exact. If it is not exact, these calculations will not work. So again, let me just do that one more time. So if we review this one more time. So VLOOKUP, we're choosing a cell, and in this case, we've used a blank cell because we're inputting the information we're trying to find later in this blank cell. The range of the information here that we're wanting to use, what column we're using, and again, columns start in the data table and not in the actual worksheet, and then true or false. True being approximate, false being exact or absolute.